So we are back once again with another shitty shark movie on the Blockbusters show. We are talking about Shark Night 3D. This one was suggested to me long after I did the last one of these, which I believe was Devilfish. After I did that review, I remember somebody suggested that I do this movie because they know I'm a fan of the comedy show Schitt's Creek, and they noticed that one of the actors from Schitt's Creek was in this movie. It's the actor that plays the character Ted on that show. So, knowing that I'm a fan of that show, and that I talked about a dumb shark movie or knockoff Jaws movie like Devilfish, they said, hey, why don't you review this movie? And it's taken me a while to finally get to it, but we are here now and we are talking about Shark Night 3D.
Saltwater lake. I don't know how the hell they got in here. Maybe someone put them there.
What is this, some kind of sick game?
Going back to the year of 2011, where there was just nothing but shitty movies coming out, and, well, this is one of them. I mean, it's better than something like Big Mama 3, but it's still a stupid shark movie, so of course it was going to end up on Blockbusters show eventually. The silver lining here is that it has more of a budget to work with compared to something like Sand Sharks or Jurassic Shark or Shark Exorcist, so at least it has that going for it. Newly arrived at her family's Lake Island cabin, college student Sarah and her friends prepare for a weekend of fun in the sun. But soon after they dive into the lake, football player Malik stumbles out of the water with a grievous wound. Thinking Malik is the victim of a freak accident, the friends pile into a tiny speedboat and head for a hospital. To their horror, they discover that they are surrounded by hundreds of massive, hungry sharks. 4 out of 10 on IMDb, 19% on Rotten Tomatoes, and 2 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Shit, that's surprisingly lower than I thought. So aside from having Ted from Schitt's Creek, I recognize the guy who directed the movie. His name was applied to a couple of dramas that were okay, mediocre for the most part, but considering that this is a kind of tongue-in-cheek, wink-wink, nudge-nudge horror comedy, if you want to, comedy in quotation marks, it's not surprising that this is the same director of the culty classic that is Snakes on a Plane.
Enough is enough! I have had it with these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane!
Apparently this director decided he wanted to do his own dumb, big budget, relatively big budget. He wanted to do his own version of a dumb killer shark movie. In fact, the original title of this movie was going to be Untitled Killer Shark Thriller. And then they decided to go with the more streamlined Shark Night in 3D. And they eventually dropped the 3D for home video releases, obviously. But I remember at the time this movie was being advertised as Shark Night in 3D, even for the theaters that were showing the movie in 2D. Honestly, I would have been more impressed if they actually kept the 3D when it hit home video and they didn't even give you the option for 3D. That would have been funny. What is this movie about? Simply put, dumb college kids go out to a secluded area that just so happens to have sharks, and they get picked off one by one. The long version of that is as follows. So you have 3 college guys and 3 college girls, and they decide that they're going to go out to one of the girls' big family getaway resort islands, because her family's apparently super rich. And the reason they're going out to celebrate is because their friend Malik got a B on his test.
B plus, baby. What? Yeah. Come on now. Oh man. Now I'm gonna pay you back.
I know I keep harping on this, that, oh, they got Ted from Schitt's Creek before Schitt's Creek in this movie. But there actually is another person in the cast who I recognized. One of the guys is played by, I don't know the actor's name, but he played JP, the main antagonist, in the stoner cult classic from Happy Madison called Grandma's Boy. Yeah, that's him. The guy who talks like this and walks around with the, like, wannabe Matrix leather duster. Yeah, he's in this movie, and he's one of the roommates.
Adios, turd nuggets.
My favorite things about these guys is they're introduced playing Halo 3 on Xbox Live. Gratuitous plug. I want to know how much Microsoft paid for that. And it's one of those movies where it's like, okay, they're playing a video game, but if you know a thing or two about video games, none of it is actually accurate. They're playing Halo 3 on Xbox Live, and they have it that, like, there's two other monitors that are displaying, like, guys they're playing with.
Not really hearing you because I just logged you in and you're losing gamer points.
Dude, it took me 6 months to get this.
Yes, it did.
So what exactly does that mean? Like, an achievement? Or is it supposed to be, like, on the leaderboard of the lobby that they're playing in? Not realistic. All the dumb shark stuff, I could handle that. The fact there wasn't one annoying squeaker kid in this Xbox Live lobby playing Halo with these guys, not buying that shit. But after that, they all meet up and they take off, and we get one of 3 montages where they speed up the footage. In this case, they have this, like, POV shot of them driving to, you know, to try and get to the island. Then later you have a fast forward montage where they're all getting ready to go out on the beach, and it's like, how many montages can you have within, like, the first 20 to 30 minutes of this thing? Being a horror movie, you also have to have a part where the preppy college kids stop at a gas station and they come across some rednecks, and the rednecks don't take too kindly to them city folk because all city folk look down on country people. You know, I can't tell what's more annoying. Generic asshole redneck characters in horror movies, or dumb rom-coms that are set in the country somewhere, and they have that message of, like, oh, dumb city people, you know, it's like the real people are out there in the country, you know, you dumb people with your technology and your nightclubs. It's here where they establish some of the characters who are obviously going to come back and be the obvious villains. You have the killer rednecks, and you got creepy guy that works at the convenience store. And I love this. He sells them Red Bull, and he gives them a vodka that seriously just has a white label on it that just says, in bland Arial font text, vodka.
Just these items.
I haven't seen something like that since the generically labeled light beer cans in What to Expect When You're Expecting. After the montage of everyone getting ready, we then see all the characters just kind of mingling. They have some quirky banter between each other. You know, they're trying to set up some possible relationships that are going to go somewhere in the movie.
When are you gonna drop the boy toy and saddle up with a real man, huh?
Oh, really? You got someone in mind?
A very important thing to point out here, if you're one of those people that watches dumb schlocky horror movies just because you want to see some gratuitous nudity, there's none of that shit in this movie. This is a PG-13, so there is no nudity. They do show off the girls in bikinis, but that's about it. There's no nudity whatsoever. Establish a couple of other characters. There's this one guy who used to go out with the blonde girl, and they broke up because he was an asshole, and she like horribly disfigured his face or something like that. And there's also this local sheriff who's good friends with the blonde girl's family, but you know that's just a setup for the inevitable betrayal, because eventually it turns out he's working with the asshole guy that she used to go out with, and the rednecks, and the guy who worked at the convenience store. They're all in on it. They're all together. After they establish those characters, they go out on the beach for a little bit, and here's where we get the sharks. The sharks attack Malik, and he comes back to the shore missing an arm, and they go to look for it, and then, you know, oh no, there was a shark out there in the water. And at first I was thinking, okay, are they even going to come up with a reason for why there's a shark in a lake instead of the ocean? But they actually do explain it. It's that they're saltwater sharks. All our main college kids pour onto a boat. They try to take off to the local hospital to see if they can get their friend Malik some help. And one of the girls ends up falling into the water, and a shark gets her, and the body count begins. it's very important to point out, the sharks in this movie waffle back and forth between being animatronics, which look decent for the most part, and CG that looks really shitty. Even for a moderately budgeted movie that went to theaters, they look like shit. I mean, even something like the snakes in Snakes on a Plane look better than this. End up crashing the boat, which causes a huge fireball, and for some reason that doesn't get the attention of any authorities, because then you have the characters shoot some flares, and one guy starts shooting a shotgun up in the air to try and get attention. And another boat ends up showing up, and it's the rednecks. And it's funny because later the sheriff shows up, and the sheriff is like, "Oh yeah, I saw you kids had a bonfire."
Slow your roll. Wait, nobody sent you? I saw the bonfire.
He saw the bonfire, but not the flares, or more importantly, the fireball from the ship crashing. I almost forgot, they also add the cliche of, oh, cell phones don't work. You know, oh, no bars on the cell phone.
No, there's no reception out here. Just try anyway.
We gotta stop the bleeding. We need a first aid kit. Sarah, do you have a first aid kit?
Yes, it's in the house.
Okay.
Wait.
Oh my god, shit. I'm not getting anything.
Just keep trying.
The thing is, I get it, you know, it's an island, so I could kind of buy the whole cell phone thing not working, but it's like, dude, this house they have doesn't even have landline. Like I said, one of the characters fires off a shotgun to try and get help, and a boat comes to pick them up, and lo and behold, it's the rednecks. They push one of the guys into the water, and he ends up getting eaten. And they force the girl to strip down to her bra and panties, and they just make these guys generic creeps who are just ogling these girls.
My eyes are up here.
Yeah. I know where your eyes are, darling.
Two of the other characters, Malik and one of the other guys that was there, Blake, he was basically the generic jock guy. And you know this because he took a can of spray tan and spray tanned his junk.
Not going to. Oh, that's classy.
Then you have this dumb scene where they're trying to get off the island and they're on a jet ski, and Malik ends up jumping in there because he notices that there's a shark after them. Which is funny because earlier in the movie they had this dumb point to show that, like, you know, they had him lying down on the floor of the boat as they were trying to get him to a hospital, and then his blood ends up leaking into the water, and since sharks can smell blood, that's what ends up getting the sharks to follow the boat. So they do a similar thing here where, like, they're being chased by the sharks while they're on the jet ski, and then Malik jumps into the water to sacrifice himself to help save Blake. It's entirely pointless for Malik to do that because Blake ends up getting eaten just a couple seconds later. Because instead of trying to pull over to dry land where the sharks probably can't get him, he just keeps jet skiing, and then a shark lunges out of the water and eats him whole right then and there, and then flops back into the water. I'm personally at a crossroads for something like that. On one hand, it's incredibly ridiculous. At the same time, it's probably the coolest kill in the entire movie. Eventually they put all their cards on the table and they reveal why all these guys are in it together, why the sheriff, the rednecks, and David, I think was the asshole ex-boyfriend guy's name. Yeah, when you really get down to it, the last two characters to survive, the two main survivors of the movie, are Ted from Schitt's Creek and Sarah Paxton, the blonde girl. I will admit, this is probably just me being a fan of Schitt's Creek, but I did think it was funny every time Ted lists off facts about sharks. I'm just like, well, yeah, of course he knows a lot about animals. He's a veterinarian. In Schitt's Creek, he plays a veterinarian in the town. So of course he knows all these shark facts. So after some of the main characters have gotten it, and even some of the bad guys like the rednecks are eventually killed off, The sheriff reveals his plan for why they're doing all of this, and it's the stupidest thing, even for a movie like this. He reveals that the reason they're doing this is because they want to sell the footage of the people being attacked by sharks to Shark Week.
What is cable television's longest-running programming event? Shark Week, loser. And a few of those 20 million want to watch the real hardcore shit you can't get on basic cable. And we're willing to bet that they'll pay top dollar for it.
Yes, really. And what made it even funnier was to find out that they actually tried to tie this movie into Shark Week, because when they released it, it was at the same time Shark Week 2011 was going on. So I'm like, damn, okay, I get it. You guys wanted the Shark Week money. I get it, but damn. Ted gives the guy the slip. He ends up pushing the sheriff in. The sheriff gets attacked by the sharks. It ultimately comes down to Ted having to save Sarah because David, I think that was his name. It was something that started with a D. David, Dale, something. But he puts Sarah into a cage so that they can force feed her to the shark. And what's funny is, even for one of those scuba cages for, scuba divers to go in to protect themselves from being attacked by a shark when they're like trying to get nature footage or something, there's a big gap that she could easily swim through. And get it? It's supposed to be a tongue-in-cheek horror film with comedic elements to it, but still, that's really dumb. Sarah and Ted, they end up giving the shark the slip, and the asshole ex-boyfriend guy ends up getting his. He gets eaten by the shark. They get up onto the boat after Ted stabs the shit out of the shark. And then, just as you think all is calm and, oh, this movie's going to have a happy ending, they look out to the ocean, and then the camera pans in on the water, shark lunges at the camera, and then credits. Overall, I will say this. This movie was better than I thought it was going to be. It's not a very good movie. It's very tongue-in-cheek, and it's one of those things where it's like, you have to be really into these kind of movies to like them. The thing is, I've seen so many of them. So the whole, oh, we're making a dumb movie on purpose, we have characters acknowledging dumb horror movie tropes in the dialogue, that kind of thing, it's become incredibly played out to me. Sometimes it works, and other times I just find it annoying. There's obviously a lot of people out there who like those kind of movies, and I feel like they would enjoy this one fine. But it feels like, because they had more of a budget to work with, and a couple of actors that you might recognize. Like, I forgot to mention, the sheriff is played by Donald Logue, and Donald Logue is like a really good character actor, and unfortunately he always just got the shaft. He usually ended up in shitty movies. Like, two movies that I talked about before on Blockbusters show that he was in Ghost Rider, which was admittedly dumb but entertaining, and he was also in the dumbass Max Payne movie for a couple of scenes. The thing is, this movie kind of took me back to movies from the late 90s and 2000s that were riding that Jaws ripoff bandwagon. There was like a resurgence of them. On the lower budget end of the market, you had stuff like Crocodile, Octopus, Lake Placid, stuff like that. And then on the bigger budget scale, you had movies like Anaconda, and then a bunch of actual shark movies. You had stuff like The Deep and Deep Blue Sea, and years later you got The Meg. That movie also had some schlocky dialogue that was obviously intentional and had like a wink wink nudge nudge factor to it. But I at least remember a little bit more about that one. This one, I wouldn't say it's forgettable. Like I said, not as bad as I was expecting it to be, but I think it really depends on if you like these kind of movies. I can think of two movies right now that kind of had a very similar vibe to this, because this movie has the cliched evil rednecks in it. One movie it made me think of was Tucker and Dale versus Evil. It was self-aware, and it had a really fun premise. You had it that it was a great miscommunication comedy where you have rednecks who think that these college kids are killing themselves across their woods because they're actually trying to kill them. And you have these college kids who think that they're evil killer rednecks, so they're trying to kill them. And there's a bunch of like really funny juxtaposition there. I remember somebody brought that movie up in the comments when I talked about Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And I was so happy that somebody did, because it's like, oh shit, Tucker and Dale. Yes, I remember loving that movie back in the day. And it's still really funny. I rewatched it a while ago. It's a damn good movie. And the other movie it made me think of was that stupid 2010 Piranha remake. It was dumb, but I at least remember it being fairly tongue-in-cheek, and that doesn't excuse its faults, because it was a really stupid movie. But at least it had what it promised. It's like, okay, piranhas going around, they get into heavily populated areas, they tear people up, and there's a shitload of boobage. There was like a bunch of boobs in that movie. I think overall, you have to go into this movie knowing that it's dumb. And if you're one of those people that likes movies that are tongue-in-cheek, and they know they're stupid, and they have hokey dialogue, and they poke fun at the tropes, this one, it's not a terrible watch. I mean, I could probably watch it again at some point. It's not my favorite of these dumb killer shark movies we've had as of late, but I will say this, it was way better than some of the other shitty shark movies I've talked about. It was way better, I mean, just in production alone, it was way better than something like Sand Sharks or Jurassic Shark, and it was especially more watchable than Shark Exorcist. So tune in next time to the Blockbuster Show, where we'll be talking about 2 movies in one video, and it's of a subgenre that was huge around this time. In fact, both these movies also came out in 2011, and it was riding the trend of wannabe Twilight movies. We're talking about Red Riding Hood and Beastly. But until then, guys, I'm Adam Sykes of the Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.
Intro to Human Portrait last semester, I had the pleasure of sketching your genitals every Tuesday and Thursday.